Yeah, let's dive right in with both feet. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out for the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Yes, sir. So let's begin our journey with this. It's something that I don't think we've talked about a lot or processed, but 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives, changing the world. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
Well, gosh, for like many people, I had my sort of big reckoning. I was working at Microsoft and had been for close to a decade. And then I'd had this idea for a startup that had been kind of like mulling around in my brain, like so many people who are in corporate life of like, oh, I'll have freedom and I'll do a startup. And myself and the person that I was working with at Microsoft, we talked about co-founding this thing. It was kind of the thing that we chatted about after work and all that kind of stuff. And then right around or just before, like literally the week before lockdown started, we said, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then lockdown hit. And I was in Seattle. He was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we went in feet first and just jumped in and did it. So it was, we left Microsoft in September or October of that year and then lived the startup life for, for a good for a good 4 or 5 years. And it was a very interesting challenge trying to do things like raise venture capital funds and stuff like that when the normal sort of physical networking side of that is taken away from you and all of that has to be done over Zoom. So it was kind of a crazy time personally, a crazy time professionally. But I look back on it as a time of transition for me, I guess.
So let's get into the good work you're doing right now as an entrepreneur and as an AI guru. I want to put you in front of a bunch of 13-year-olds at career day, and one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you explain what you do to them?
Yeah, so I tell them that I'm a translation layer. So I take all of the complicated technical technology innovations that are happening in the world and translate them to help them understand what it means for their world. And that could be a group of 13-year-olds in a school. That could be people that are starting college. That could be business leaders in an organization, or it could be our moms and dads, right? Because this is something that impacts all of us. And actually, my entire career, I've been a form of a translation layer, taking all the complicated technical stuff and translating it into whatever realm people are in.
Which is totally essential. I come from the tech world, and if we didn't have those levels of translation, we would all be lost.
Yeah, yeah. And I think specifically when it comes to AI, one of the things that I would say disappoints me the most in terms of how the conversation about AI is happening is that for many people at least, it's it's all about and only about the technology innovation. Whereas in reality, this is a disruptive force that historians will talk about. And when we think about prior mass changes to our society, things like the invention of the printing press or the industrial revolution and so on, the story is as much about what happens to people as it is about the technology behind the innovation itself. So occasionally you'll see like people on LinkedIn, for example, talking about there's a whole bunch of people talking about AI that don't know about AI. And actually, many of them do. They're talking about it from a different angle,
Yeah.
right? They're talking about the impact on people, or they're talking about how it's translating to how jobs are changing, or they're talking about how what the economic impact is going to be. All of those things are super, super important, and they're as important as the technology itself.
What I find, there's a couple things that I find interesting about this advent of AI. First, we've been around it for so long, and I don't think people realize it. From Siri to Alexa, to all of
Hmm.
these home devices that we have, there's always been this level of AI that's existed in our lives. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke didn't come up with the idea of it. You
Nope.
know, he embellished it for a Hollywood script, but it's always kind of been around. And then I was thinking too, I'm wondering with when I look at the political and news spheres of what's happened over the last 4, 5, 6 years, AI is completely scrambling everything.
Yeah.
Disinformation, misinformation is epic. And I wonder how much of this AI is accelerated so it can push agendas and bots that will confuse us more to lean political machines one way or another. It just dawned on me yesterday while I was driving. I was like, is that happening?
I think it's a fair question. I think that I I think if you ask, is anything happening, as in, is anything changing? You could take any single aspect of society. You could take the political sphere. You could take, if you like, the more commercial sphere. Um, any interaction that we are having with any other human that is that has a digital element to it is being infused by AI in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
Sometimes that's highly deliberate and highly targeted. Sometimes it's just, part of how these organizations do business. But I mean, you and I are recording this over Zoom today. There are multiple layers of AI technology that is AI empowered technology that is allowing that to happen efficiently and effectively. Whether it's the technology that prevents somebody from basically interfering with this call, the technology that supports the effective scheduling of it. Some of that technology is keeping us safe. Some of that technology is simply working in the background to make sure it works efficiently. Some of that technology potentially can be used or abused to help us work differently. So I think that I think the thing here is that there's a visible layer to AI, and then there are all these invisible layers of how AI is changing our daily life.
very well said. Yeah. So what when you were a kid, when you were in career day, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
Oh, that was easy. I that began when I was unbelievably young. I think I was probably 5 or 6 years old. Surgeon. So I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. It never changed. I'm not a surgeon. And but that got me all the way to medical school. And then my first year of medical school, I really struggled, right? I loved it. I loved the fact that I was, living my dream, getting to be a doctor, but I struggled academically really for the first time in my life, and I couldn't really understand why. And it turned out I've got something rather unusual called aphantasia, which means that I have no visual memory. And so it turns out that if you have no visual memory, things like pathology and anatomy and stuff like that are really hard. We would we would like do the bit. Hopefully, this is not too graphic for people that are listening, but there is an anatomy component and there is a cadaver, and you're dissecting a body, and they would, pull back the sheet on the body, and everybody around me would recognize what they'd previously seen, and I wouldn't recognize it. And I was like, this is going to be really hard. I got through a year of medical school, and did just well enough where they said you can repeat a year if you like. We're not going to throw you out. But I realized it was just not for me. So I ended up switching to do a math major. Don't really know why. It was just something different to do. And then took this sort of left turn into computing and IT, where I've been in and around ever since. So yeah, it was a major thing. I probably lived with the difficulty and the almost like the guilt of failing at the thing that I wanted to do. I was probably in my mid 30s before I finally could let that go and go, the path you went down ended up all right, and
Yeah.
it's led you to here.
So take me back to your roots. Where were you born and raised, and what were these roots of medicine and science and eventually IT? How did all of this become your reality?
Yeah, so I was born in Oxford in England, and Oxford's an interesting place as you can imagine. You it's lovely. I'd recommend it. People should go visit and so on. But if you're hanging out in a coffee shop or you're hanging out in a pub and you just sort of like open your ears and listen a bit, you know, you can be in the coffee shop in Blackwell's, the bookstore, and there might be a couple of Nobel laureates having a chat, right? It's a very there's this sort of like 1,000 years of knowledge and wisdom that is sort of like everywhere around you. And I definitely I definitely think that turned me into a very curious human being. But then also, I was I'm old enough whereby my first computer was a VIC 20, my second computer was a Commodore 64, and I just started playing a lot with coding and technology and in more generally. My first job, my first paid job was building PCs and installing operating systems on PCs when I was about 16. So that just sort of like computers were absolutely part of my world, and it was a natural thing for it to go from an interest to my job. And then, but I've always played with those two sides of it, the human side of it and the IT side, and the pure technical side of it. My first jobs out of college were in IT training, and I did a ton of mentoring and coaching and and things of that nature. So I was always I was interested in the two things, the technology itself and then the impact that the technology was having on the humans. And um, through college, I did I directed plays and wrote for the college newspaper and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of like sort of bring those two sides together with much of the work that I did. And I suppose, a lot of medicine's about humanity. So that's kind of like how I've scratched that itch to keep the human side as well as the technology side. These are good
So
questions. I don't think I've thought about it properly.
yeah, right. No, that was great. So I'm curious, who has been that kind of inspirational force or that hero in your life that's allowed you to navigate from this initial dream of being a surgeon to where you're at in IT with AI and everything that's happening in your life now?
Well, I think I'll be very I think of like there are definitely people that, sort of are well known that I look up to or draw inspiration from. Turing is definitely, would definitely be one of them. Alan Turing's a bit of a hero for a lot of Brits for the work he did in the Second World War, but also the the vision that he had, right, including the vision around this world, this artificial intelligence world. But for me, I'd say it's probably much more personal than that. I think my dad, who died in 2007, kind of remains a bit of an inspiration for me for several reasons, but not least of which he's somebody who left school at 14, and ultimately realized as he got into the world of work that he was deeply interested in lifelong learning and continue to educate himself. So he went through, what was effectively the world's first distance learning organization, the Open University in the UK, and got himself from somebody who basically had nothing at school, like leaving school at 14 with zero education, through to getting his bachelor's in chemistry and became, a successful chemist. So I in my mum's house, there's my graduation photo, my brother's, so me from King's College London, my brother's graduation photo from Fitzwilliam College, Cambridge, and then there's my dad's graduation photo as a much older man from the Open University. And every time I go up the stairs and I see those three, that's the one I stop on because I'm I'm like 10 times as proud of his graduation than I am of mine, and it serves a complete inspiration for me because effectively that was human reinvention at work, right?
Yeah.
And we live in a world where it has never been more important for us to continue to reinvent ourselves in a world that is being increasingly dominated by technology. We need to reinvent ourselves to remain relevant. And even though my dad's not been around since 2007, he reminds every time I see that picture, every time I think of him, he reminds me of that.
So, what is the energy every day for you to wake up to do this work that you do, to stay up with a technology that's moving at blinding speed, to be an ombudsman to help people understand it, to take care of your soul, all of these things every day? What is the energy that you have to do this?
I think some of it stems from what I was just describing. I mean, in say like I was the one thing that I'm lucky about is that I was born with the curiosity gene. All right. I have there is there is literally nothing that doesn't interest me in some way, shape, or form. Right. I'm I'm looking at the image behind you and I uh I don't know what that image is. I don't know if it was created by you or somebody famous or what it is, but I'm fascinated by it and I want to know, right? And so I have that thing in me that is less about there's oh my God, there's so much information in the world and I don't have it and therefore I must get it because that's a fool's errand. Um, I think the older you get, the more you realize that you don't know anything, and the more you have to be kind of like more comfortable with that. But at the same time, the fact that there is so much in the world that I don't know gives me an opportunity to be able to explore everything. And no matter how like for the last 4 or 5 years, my obsession has been with the sort of broader question of what AI is doing to us as individuals and to groups and teams and organizations and society at large. That I could spend the rest of my life looking at that, and I will only scratch the surface of it, and it's changing constantly. So therefore, I will never ever have the never stop learning. So it's that's what keeps me going. This idea that there's so much to figure out,
Yeah.
and I am always a beginner and love the idea of finding out.
So that's one of my originals back there, and it's the United States of America. I had an extra piece of canvas. I paint a lot, and I was like, I
Yeah.
haven't painted the United States.
Well, there you
So
go.
I painted it, and I had a previous logo, and my wife was like, you got to get something fresh. So I picked this, and yeah, off and running, you know?
Absolutely. There you
Yeah,
go. So I now know something that I didn't know at the start of this call. And
exactly.
life is like that, right?
Yeah,
And the one thing I would say is that um that yes, I was born with that curiosity gene, but it is a mindset that you can cultivate. Every single interaction that you have with every other human being is an opportunity to learn something. And I make that my challenge. If I take an Uber ride, I want to know, the driver can teach me something. I know they can,
yeah,
right? If I'm at the coffee shop, same, right? And it's such a great way to live because like let's say you go to a conference, for example, and you're like, well, I didn't learn much there. Well, I bet you learned some things, right?
yeah.
And so you can find if you're looking for it, you can find those things and you can get joy out of those things.
I always find travel and going into new experiences like that kind of like the way you should approach the afterlife. You don't know what's going to happen, but go into it hoping that you're going to get magic and joy
Heck yeah.
and something revelatory. That's really the bottom line, you know.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to that young version of you incubating all of this curiosity and this dream of being a surgeon. And let's say you're 16, you have a dream tonight, you run into that version of you at your age now, and you walk into a room and there's a film projector, and you go up and you hit play, and there's a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've lived. Would that
Yeah.
young version of you believe it turned out this way?
No, definitely not. And I I wonder I wonder if that 16-year-old version of me would have been disappointed because they were obviously so um intent on the journey. But I hope the thing that they would have learned is that life is never linear, and planning planning the planning your life in that way probably is not helpful.
Yeah.
So so when I, for example, when I mentor young people today that are entering the workforce, I talk about, breadth of experiences. And when I brought people into my company, right, my goal when I bring an intern in or indeed any junior employee in is to give them as many different possible experiences as humanly possible. A, because it'll help them figure out what they want to be when they truly grow up, but B, because it will give them that breadth that allows them to adapt and adjust and go in different directions. So I think my 16-year-old was incredibly linear, right? Was like, okay, I even knew like a consultant, the average age of a consultant surgeon in the United Kingdom is 37 and a half years old, right? And as in that's you're called a consultant surgeon when you kind of reach the peak of your profession. I can tell you that because I knew that when I was 16, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that was okay, by the time I'm 37, I'm gonna be right? And I'm certainly not there, but I live in a different country. I have had extraordinary experiences. I have like met some unbelievable, incredible people that surgeon would never have met. And I've learned some things and done some things that surgeon could never have done. So I hope after that 16-year-old had watched that movie and then gone back and reflected a bit, maybe they'd have gone, actually, that life might have been a bit better.
Yeah. So let's dig in a little further. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that gets your book, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your
Mhm.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Hmm. Gosh, that's deep.
Yeah.
Um, I I think I think I'm somebody who this is one of the reasons why this is difficult is probably because if I'm being truly honest with myself, the one area where my curiosity is a little lacking is me, right? I'm so externally curious. This is not uncommon, I think. But my curiosity is so external that often I tend not to look too deeply inside myself because I don't find myself as interesting as the rest as everything else that is out there. But I think probably the core of who I am is centered around I believe hugely strongly in, for example, fairness. I believe hugely strongly in sort of, a just world, and I believe hugely strongly that the world can be a better place. And that it's incumbent upon all of us, even in tiny, tiny, tiny ways, how we treat people, how how we interact with people, how we understand others' plight and don't judge them for it. I think those are sort of like part of my core. And then um, the curiosity, sort of, if you like, gets layered on top of that. The one thing I will say is that I'm unbelievably comfortable. I've traveled to dozens and dozens of different countries. I'm 48 states in the United States. I've lived in different parts of the country. I lived in Seattle, Washington. I now live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, two very, very different parts of the country. Um, and I'm very comfortable in all those surroundings.
Yeah,
So I think that I I think that sort of is reflected by this idea of sort of like there's a basic humanity to everybody that once you strip everything else away is there. And I think I'm able to kind of like tap into that and be comfortable in all kinds of different surroundings because of that. That's
I
about as
like.
that's about as deep as you're gonna get,
I
Joe. I
love
hope.
it. No, no, no. I love it, man. So, if anybody wants to get a copy of the AI Ready Human, they want to reach out to you, they want more, they want to hire you, any of the good business, where do they
Sure.
go?
So it's nice and easy. paulslater.ai. Everything is on there. The book is obviously on Amazon, all good retailers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you start with paulslater.ai, you can find your way to anything else. Um, and and yeah, I hope people will read it and start thinking about what AI means for them as individuals because it doesn't have to be scary, um, but just learning how to engineer a prompt is not what you need to do. You need to think about your role in in the world where AI is becoming increasingly dominant. And I hope the book helps with that.
I have no doubt that it will. Hey, man, Paul, this has been great. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with the book and with everything else. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Joe.
Yes, sir.